What's up, outliers? Happy Saturday. So usually the stream on Saturdays is built for going through up and coming meme stocks. And again, I have a very specific, I use the true definition of that. It's not some terrible term. It literally just means stocks that have a cult-like or significant social media following. By extension, stuff like Tesla, Amazon ends up on meme stock lists. So just to be super clear right out of the gate with that term, because I know sometimes it catches people and they're like, GameStop isn't a meme stock. It is. And that's not a bad thing. But like Newton, funny enough, is a prime example of that. A lot of the recent cause of stir on X is because of the use of memes and some other stuff. So this stream typically focuses on that, but I want to take a few minutes to talk about the whole shenanigans from today, just because I think a lot of people are super confused, at least from the X side of stuff. I have to be completely honest. I had absolutely no idea what was going on. And it's because I'm really not active on X. I just kind of do my own thing. When I go on there, sometimes I'm posting something to announce like I'm doing a live stream or something, and then I just pop right back off. I'm not really doing anything on here. Yet I got an email today from a concerned community member, and they were asking me like, hey, do you think, like, is there anything going on with Newton? This was from JT. JT says, hey man, what are your thoughts on Richard's recent posts? Seems out of character. I know you have talked to him directly. Thanks. So the first thing I thought there is, one, really, really cool that a lot of people really care and like Newton. I do too. He's a good dude. So I was actually happy to see that. It reminded me of kind of just like a standard welfare check. Like, yo, can you take a look at this person, please, and make sure that they're okay? We care about them. That's awesome. So of course I was like, yeah, sure. Now I, in that email, reflected what I shared earlier. I don't really pay attention to his posts or literally anybody else's posts on X. I really don't consume a lot of external stuff. So I had no idea what they were referring to. So I typically daily get a text from Newton. He shares some of the stuff that he shares on his X page, typically some sort of quote or scripture passage. The funny thing about that is I'm still not sure how religious I am, meaning I identify as like spiritual. Like I believe that there could be things, but there's a lot of inconsistencies and whatnot. So I'm always navigating stuff. So when Newton asked a while ago, like, hey, do you mind if I send you these? Which I thought was very respectful. I was like, yeah, sure. I'm always happy to just learn new stuff. And even if it's not something that I directly mirror, it gives him an opportunity to fulfill one of the tenets of his religion, which is to spread it. And then it also serves as thought provocation for me to learn more. So I get those from him pretty much every single day. And every once in a while, typically once a week, twice a week, I'll respond to the text and I'll be like, yo, man, what's up? How's everything? Right? Just regular touch base. And it literally just so happened before I checked my email, because he sends the texts early in the morning. And before I checked my email or anything, I just shot one of those texts over. Like, hey, what's up, man? How's everything going? It literally pure happenstance. Did not look at X, did not look at emails, and just chilling. So as I hit him up, we were going back and forth. I'll tell you a little bit of like the broad conversation, because obviously the conversation then turned when we found all the stuff was going on. Okay. So today he sent me a quote, Psalm 119 to 127, with a cool picture. It looks like Yosemite in the winter. That's the text. And later in the morning, I texted him. I was just like, yo, I literally said, what up, man? That's it. No exclamation point, no period, nothing. Just what up, man? And he goes, yo, what's up, Eric? And then we start going back and forth. I give him some updates on some of the stuff that I've been working on and whatnot. And the first thing he texted me after that was, well, it is Nove. So I'm activating meme rampage again like last year. And then he gives me some rationale as to why he's doing that. And at the end of that text, he says, everybody thinks I've been hacked. So that is when I then checked my email. And then I was just like, oh shit, people really think that this dude is like hacked. Okay, fine. So I go back and forth with him via text. And at one point he mentioned, let me see. Here we go. It was not that far down. And he goes, essentially saying, if you post a comment on social that we text, it might win people over that I'm not hacked. Because the main thing is Newton is just trying, like, he can't control everything, but he also doesn't want people spinning in circles, like genuinely concerned for his well-being. So that's why he mentioned that. And at first, I honestly just took it as a joke. So my response to him was, I responded to something else, and then my response to that comment was, I'm too childish. I would 100% be like, can confirm Newton has been hacked. And I put that in air quotes. And he goes, yeah, that wouldn't help. ROFL, because obviously it's not meant to, it's just a joke. And that's when I told him after that, I was just like, but if you really want me to, more than happy. Newton, again, like I speak with Newton pretty regularly. I like him. He's a good human being. He's a good dude. We've gone back and forth a lot. He's taught me a lot about GameStop. And if you guys will recall, I'm the one that started introducing him to options. So it was super symbiotic. We're both fascinated by this broader thing. So it's like the most trivial of favors that I could have ever come across somebody asking. So that's when I said, of course I'll do it. And I told him, I was just like, yeah, I'm going to the gym. I'll take a look as soon as I get to the gym. So I make a post when I got to the gym. And this was the post. I essentially told him that I'm going to just make a post and then you can post it on your page so that your people can see it at the top. And then everybody can see that I'm confirming that I spoke with him and he's fine. And so he did that. And then obviously the game just started getting kind of crazy because then there's like people like Han was saying this, and I'm sure this was like partially in jest, but partially not. That's the funnest. That's why this whole situation is so unbelievably hilarious to me, because the GameStop community is all about the tin. It's all about the memes. It's all about hidden meanings. It's all about Roaring Kitty posting an emoji timeline that people have spent literally hundreds of hours trying to dissect. Like that's what this thing is built on. And it's awesome. The downside to that is tin gives and tin takes. So people are hyper skeptical of everything. So that's when people started thinking like, oh, you're blocked or you're hacked too. And I was just like, okay, I can see where this is going. So then there was a couple other people that were like, yo, I've never heard of this guy before or whatever. And I was like, okay. So anyways, to summarize all of this, he's right now, Newton is doing the same thing he did last year. Now, rightfully so, I didn't know this because I responded to a comment about it. This right here. I made that comment because that's what he told me. I didn't like go back and verify it because I trust him. Like I'm on the phone with him. I don't think he's lying to me. So he was like, yeah, I did this last November. And I was just like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But then somebody told me they sent a reply that was like scrolling through his November posts of last year. And it's all just the religious quotes and stuff. And they were like, well, were the memes from last year? And I was just like, that's a fucking good question. And it was not that long after I got that he called me. I didn't ask him to call me. He didn't ask me to call him. He just called me. And typically, if I'm free, I will answer literally for anybody. So he and I hop on the phone, and we're not even talking about this in the beginning. We were on the phone for almost an hour and a half. We were just bullshitting about life, trading, GameStop stuff. And then towards the end of the conversation, I was like, oh yeah. So I was like, what the fuck? What do you do about this? Like this partially worked, partially didn't. People now think I'm fucking hacked. And then I was like, yo, by the way, did you delete your posts from November from, the last time you did the meme thing? And he was just like, yeah, I delete everything. And I was just like, well, shit, there goes the direct evidence that I was citing on your behalf. So then he sent me his the engagement graph. And there's a way to reason through this. The way that we reason through this is if I go back to Newton's page, I think I literally asked him to post it here. So if we go back to Newton's page, I asked him to post this. The reason why I asked him to post this is his impressions and his posts. The reason why I asked him to do this is because he deletes his stuff. There's no evidence of the stuff being there. It's gone, which is, again, one thing. However, the question I asked him is like, do you post your religious quotes every single day? And he says, yes. I was like, oh, perfect. Then this effectively shows the same thing. So the thing that this shows is that this is what the religious posts typically do. You can see his activity. You can see the impressions. And then you can see the ramp happening right now that's like 4x plus what it was over the low before. And if we compare this to the same time frame last year, he's doing this same shit. So this is clearly from the same activity that he did last year because we're starting to see the very same effect this year. So I think in general, this just has confused a lot of people. And the other thing, I guess, this is the other part that, again, one thing to note, admin note, about my involvement with this whole thing, I am so tangentially related to all of this, it's not even funny. I have like bits and pieces of all this shit. Newton and I share a very similar interest in a very similar company, but we are so unbelievably different in terms of our practical application of trading. I do this for a living. It's not just one stock. I do everything, and it's because it's what I do for a living. He obviously has specialized on one thing, which is great. And it's one of the reasons why I was so insistent on exposing him to options, because I've traded options on GameStop for a long time because it's super, super effective. It's a hyper volatile name. That's what options traders look for. Okay, caveat aside. So I'm asking him, like, what kicked this whole thing off? And apparently he had followed an account that he believes is one of the cat's alternate accounts. I don't remember the name of the account. It had something to do with a dog because he went through this, he being Roaring Kitty, went through this thing where he's not a cat. He filed that on the 13G or whatever. And then he switched to Chewy in some capacity. We saw that dog. Then we saw back to a cat. So Newton has this idea that there's some symbolism between, the cat switching between these different critters. So he did some searching and he found this other account that he thinks could be the cat. And apparently National Cat Day was sometime recent. And typically speaking, Roaring Kitty does something on that. So a lot of people were waiting to see like if he was going to do anything. He didn't. So then I think that sent Newton searching to see maybe he did something somewhere else. That's about where we're at now. So if you guys have any questions on any of this, I'm happy to answer within the best of my limited capabilities and limited understanding of all this. But to summarize, Newton, unless the scenario is such that Newton's X got hacked, his cell phone got hacked, and his voice got hacked, which none of those things by themselves are that impossible. Any one or any combination of those things could have occurred, objectively speaking. However, there's a piece that really couldn't have been, which is in the phone call today, we were both of us referencing prior conversations. Stuff that was not documented in a live stream, stuff that was not documented in our texts. So in order for this whole hack thing to actually hold water, not only do those three conditions have to be met, but there needs to be a fourth condition, which is something somehow stole his fucking memory and can now repeat his memory selectively in the right circumstance. I know Elon Musk is working on the fucking brain implant thing. He just did another one in Europe, but I don't think we're that far along yet. So unless we're at the Men in Black stage of this, where there was like that little alien dude controlling the body, unless we're there, which I don't think we quite are, the guy I talked to on the phone was probably fucking Newton. That's my assumption. And I obviously have no reason to believe otherwise. So all joking aside, I spoke to him. He sounds fine. He's absolutely doing awesome. He asked me to make a post about this whole thing to try to just give people some level of reinsurance, again, from like an external party. And then obviously I have since been dragged into this joy of things. But hopefully that at least helps add a little bit of clarity around the whole thing. Right now, what Newton is doing is the same thing last year, and it's because he's excited. He thinks that we're at a very important time when it comes to the swap data, the main thing that he's been following, and he's essentially emulating the cat. One of the things that Newton mentioned on the phone, which I believe is completely accurate, I noticed this a while ago, actually, when he started posting some of the memes like quite a while ago. And I felt, I was like, oh, that's actually kind of weird, because it's like, it's almost like trying to imitate the cat. But then I realized it's way more of an emulation versus imitation. And it's because Newton believes that the cat has like two personas. He has Roaring Kitty that shows up on CNN pretending to be broken and dead in his chair, starting his live stream like a half hour late, which made the news media all fucked up because they were trying to catch the live stream live. And then there's DFV. There's the dude that is unbelievably, not only unbelievably smart, but also super ballsy. There's the dude that turned, what, 30 or 50 grand into almost, I don't even know what it was at the max. Wasn't it almost like $1 billion fucking dollars? Something like that. I know it was hundreds of millions, easy. I don't know what it was at the actual peak, but it was a ton of money. And Newton thinks that there is something about that, right? Like having two personas. So right now, Newton is emulating the meme persona, the don't be a bitch, put stuff on size because you think something is coming. And he steps into that persona, which I completely understand. I actually don't understand it from a trading lens, but I absolutely understand that from the lens of being a Marine officer. For example, 1 year for Halloween, I was a hooker. I went all out on being a hooker, and I had everything done, everything. Yet, when I stepped in front of my Marines, I wasn't a hooker. I was their officer. I was the dude that was designed to lead them. So that is like two separate things. So Stonk says, why doesn't he make a video? To be honest, to be genuinely honest, I really don't know. He's done other things that he thinks would validate himself. I think one of the things he did, he mentioned he used to do these NFT giveaways. And apparently he did another recent NFT giveaway. His thought process behind that was he's the only one that has access to the wallet that can do the giveaway. So then that would confirm that it's him in his mind. But apparently as soon as he did that, people were like, oh, well, now he's totally hacked. And I don't totally blame them, because there is that correlation between one of the accounts he followed and some Solana coin thing. That part, very, very vague. I do remember him on the phone saying that he was just like, I just thought people wouldn't click. Like, if you kind of know, don't click that shit. So that part I'm unaware of. But with respect to him not wanting to do a video, I really actually don't know, because I also invited him on the stream. I didn't expect to talk to him today because I thought he was just going to be busy, which is why he didn't want to hop on a stream. That obviously is something about it. I think that he's wanting to slowly fade out. But I'm really not positive. I don't have a better answer, because to be completely honest, I thought it would have been, I mean, we could have tamped this whole thing down in like 2 minutes if he was able to join the stream at some time today and just talk super fast and be like, yo, this is a real human being. They're right there. But to his credit, he's done a bunch of other stuff that really is meant to confirm it's him and his identity. So to summarize that really long-winded response, why he doesn't do a video, I genuinely don't know, but I do get the sense that he doesn't want to be on video. Genuinely do not know why. The rest of it, I think he's doing everything else that he can think of to try and address the broader bit, but really don't know. That one I am completely unsure. Derek says the NFT giveaway looks sketchy, but I wasn't around when he was giving them away. Yeah, and I think that's another problem, right? Is I don't know, I have no idea anything about his following and in terms of like how long his community has been with him and all that stuff. I really have no idea. But that was one of the other things he actually just kind of expected, is that everybody would have remembered this last year. But obviously that's clearly not the case. People did not remember that. So yeah, the NFT thing, definitely. I could absolutely see why that might look sketchy for sure, like literally for sure. But when he explained it to me as something that he had done historically, then I was just like, oh yeah, like if this is something he's done before from the same wallet, he's the only person that's going to have access to that wallet. Like that actually makes sense to me. That holds. But yeah, very, 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 very bizarre. Hilarious shit. And then there was some other dude I've never heard before. I had spoken to Han a couple times just because I seen a few of his posts and he and I have chatted a little bit about options. And then there was another dude that weighed in that was just like, this is a fiction. And then I was just like, Jesus fucking Christ, this goes pretty fucking deep. So I immediately reconciled that there is zero hope that everybody is going to believe that this is true. There's going to be somebody that thinks that I'm a fucking robot sitting here or some shit. But obviously I did my best to help a friend. And I think he's doing what he's comfortable doing, trying to assuage people's concerns. But yeah, it was I spoke with him. He's fine. I Can't Save says, I did the NFT purchase thing from the Roaring Puppy account he followed and is promoting just to see what it was about, how to buy 55 of Solana to send it over. See, like, that's the thing, is I do not believe that was not his intent. And I'm actually surprised to hear the promoting piece. How did he promote it? I did not talk to him about it. I really spent very little time asking about the other account. From what he explained to me, he literally had just looked at an account that he thought was interesting, potentially another version or an alt for the cat. I didn't get that he was promoting anything. GURPS says, wouldn't it be better if he contacted someone in the GameStop community who is also big to confirm his identity by ringing them or going on FaceTime? I honestly think not that I'm big in any capacity, but I think that's exactly why he asked me to do this, right? Like this small thing. Because here's the other reality, right? One of the things is people have a habit of like looking at stuff only from their perspective, but look at this shit from his perspective. He's doing something that he enjoys, about something he enjoys, having fun. And then all of a sudden he's absolutely bombarded with people thinking that he's fake, not taking any shred of evidence that they're giving him that he's not fake, wanting more and more evidence that he's not fake. It becomes just absolutely insane. There was somebody before that was like, to me, they were like, you don't even follow him. And I was like, that's insane to me to think that because I don't follow somebody on X that like I'm not friends with them or I don't know them. I don't follow my fucking mom on X. I love her to death. So it's like, it's childish. But anyways, what I was going to tell them is just like, oh shit, that's easy then. What I can do is I can follow Newton. And then I can text Newton and be like, yo, follow me for a few minutes so that people can see that it's you and I told you to do this and it's done. But then I went to his account and I realized that he follows one person. So I was like, well, shit, that's just going to make it more weird if he follows only one person and now the account that they think is hacked is now following the other account that they think is hacked, right? Like, so that's the problem, is that the burden of proof, quote unquote, just becomes this circuitous thing that you can never hit. So I think that's also why he's not going like broken arrow on this and essentially saying like, yo, you have to, did Newton do this, that, or the other thing, right? Like he tried posting a photo. He did the NFT thing from a wallet only he can see. He shared his analytics showing this. He asked me to make a post. right? And as we go through each of these stages, everybody's saying, oh, well, this got hacked. That's not this. This is fake. And it's just like, that doesn't stop. When people are at that level of fervor, the burden of proof is so unbelievably high that he and I could do a video, and I guarantee you, I literally guarantee you, somebody would be like, oh, that's not the same background. Something moved. That's somebody else. That's just the reality of it. So no idea. And obviously I'm not him. I'm not speaking for him. I'm just talking about my conversation with him, my involvement in this thing. I can't talk about why he does or does not do anything because I have no idea. I'm not him. But I do my best. Again, the only reason why I got involved in quite literally any of this was just because he asked me to. Otherwise, there's 0% chance I would have posted. You guys can go through my X. I rarely post. I really do not post much on there. I don't like social media. I didn't have much social media before I did the whole YouTube channel thing in 2020. I only had social media to keep in touch with my family. I don't like the fucking jockeying. I don't like people like vying for attention, doing listicles. Here's a thread about the 32 hacks I did to make $10. It's like, I just get so sick of that shit. The stuff that I follow on X, again, you can see what I follow. It's mostly historical videos, stuff, news sources and shit like that. I'm not really big into social media. All right. Gerb says, I'm saying, why didn't he just contact someone more credible? Like Ultimator or Dr. Michael by FaceTiming or calling them? Well, from my understanding, I think the Michael dude, that's the one that was saying that I'm also fake. So I think Michael is like literally firmly believing that Newton is hacked. Like that's my understanding so far. The other thing is, again, like your perception of them being credible doesn't meet everybody else's perception of them being credible. And again, like we followed the same fucking circle. That other person got hacked. This other thing isn't real. So that's the problem, is like, even if you pick somebody that's bigger in the space, then there's the narrative, oh my God, 2 big people in this space got hacked. This is a movement. They're moving on us, right? So again, it falls into that bucket that I was sharing earlier. From when tinfoil gets to this level, that there is no one doing it. It's just people are going to believe what they want to believe, and you just kind of go along with it. It's like the flat earthers. There are people that are genuinely convinced that Earth is fucking flat. They're out there. No matter if you show the moon and the Earth's reflection on the moon from the sun and how that's not flat, like nothing will scratch that itch for them. So, yeah. Shriek says the meme coin thing is hard to deny as a scam. What meme coin thing are you referring to? Again, that I'm not positive. Yeah, that I'm unsure. The one Newton is promoting. What is he? Can somebody explain to me what he's actually promoting? Because from my understanding, there was an account that he thought was the cat's alt, and then he followed. I don't understand like where the promotion is occurring. So that would actually be super helpful, because I can text them. I'd be like, yo, people are super sketched out about this thing. Can you explain it? So if you can help me explain, then I'm more than happy to, or if you can explain it to me, I'm more than happy to reach out to him and ask. Because I that part I don't know. He didn't mention any. Yeah, exactly. So the person, I can't save you. Is that it? The account he followed? Because again, like him following an account is not promoting literally anything. So if that's being taken as promotion, again, you can see how things can be taken so far out of a logical realm. That's the webpage of who he follows. Yeah, okay. So if that's the case, like, again, think of the mental leap that you guys are making even in the chat, right? Is he followed an account, therefore he's promoting it. That's kind of crazy. Like, if we think of that objectively, that's kind of crazy. Because just because he follows an account doesn't mean he's promoting shit. It just means he's looking to follow this thing for some reason or another. He's interested in it. That doesn't mean literally anything. Now, more broadly, I do think that if that account is doing that, I would personally believe that's probably not the cat. That would be my guess, because I don't think the cat would do that. So that part I'm unsure. I don't know anything about I don't know anything about like this specific piece of what that account is doing or not. All I know is what Newton explained to me is that he thought that that account was potentially an alt for the cat. Now, hearing that it has some Solana thing on it, again, that would lead me to believe that's probably not the cat. Now, again, we can go super deep tin, right? I still have my Viking tin hat I could put on. It's kind of hot in here, but we can go Viking tin hat and we could say, well, if the cat really wanted to be super deep undercover, he would probably not want to look like the cat. So then there's that whole bag. It's a fucking circuitous thing that, again, I think my assumption is that it'll come out in the wash. I think people will, over time, relax, kind of see that probably the same dude. Stonk says, do you think Newton is losing his marbles? No, I do not. Yeah, I do not think he's losing his marbles at all. I have said this even with our live streams together, and I've talked to him about this blindly, like openly, I mean. In terms of like his research methods, I have a lot of issues with his research methods. I still think they're really, really good compared to most people. But again, like I do this stuff at a professional level. So one of the things that I would talk to him about is trying to disprove a hypothesis versus attempting to find supporting information to prove it, which is a really difficult shift to make, but it's super important. So there's like those disagreements we have in methodology, and it's a lot of it is just because he gets so excited about this shit. Like he wants to see what he wants to see, which is human. That's normal. But I don't think he's losing his mind whatsoever. I think that he's doing the same thing that he's been doing, which is doing his best to forecast stuff, to trade it, to get positive confirmation, both in terms of successful trading and growing the account value. I think that's exactly what he's doing. And I think that there's absolutely a part of him that would really, really enjoy, again, not being the cat. He's not trying to imitate and be the cat, but I think he's trying to be his own version, right? I think he's emulating. And I think that's another part of what's going on here. So I don't think he's losing his mind at all. PHS says, what got me was the whole, I'm going to block you if you think I'm hacked. Yeah, I agree. But again, another point on that, it's important to look at stuff from somebody else's perspective. If you felt you did a series of reasonable things and still after that attempt at doing reasonable things, people outwardly are not even expressing doubt, but they're exclaiming like, this is fake or you've been hacked. That just perpetuates the nonsense. So of course I understand the rationale behind blocking those accounts, because again, those are the accounts that either have such a unique burden of proof that you would have to do the unique burden of proof for each one of those accounts. We just saw it earlier. There was somebody that was saying, oh, well, if he did this with somebody that's bigger in the GameStop space, they would have been satisfied. But again, the problem is there would have been thousands or hundreds of other people that were not satisfied with that. So then you have to do the next version. Some people that's doing a FaceTime video. Some people wouldn't like that. So my point is, when people are that distrustful, each one of them will have their own version of what the burden of proof that must be exceeded is. And he doesn't have an interest in doing that, and I don't blame him. That's jumping through a lot of fucking hoops. Same thing again with the guy that when I made the post and he was just like, this is a fraud. I don't know him from a hole in the wall. I'm sure he's a nice dude, but I'm also not going to deal with somebody that I'm saying like, oh, this is me. And they're like, no, you're not you. It's like, okay, guy, like I get it. You're where you're at, but I'm not going to interact with that. It's just trying to slow down the spread of the wildfire after a earnest attempt. And again, you're just not going to meet everybody's burden. Unfortunate, but the true. Shriek says a motivated attacker could access to multiple accounts, making it hard to regain. Exactly. And that's why I've been sitting here talking about it for 35 minutes on a live stream. I'm way too small on X for somebody to even give a shit about hacking me. I don't even care about going on X myself, let alone somebody hacking my shit to do something with it. But that's exactly why instead of doing the normal stream tonight, I said, oh, I'm going to start by talking about this stuff because I understand that the community comes from such a deep place of distrust. And again, not that I'm saying everybody should trust me. You should have the same skepticism of everything. But I do think it's harder to fake a video, and that's why I'm doing it. Now, to the question earlier, why Newton chose not to, I genuinely don't know. I really don't know. But he don't want to. And he's a grown man. He doesn't have to. That just is what it is. Maybe he cut his hair. There's a new piece of tin. I'm kidding. We didn't even talk about his hair. No fucking idea. Well, he's posted a picture so you guys could see his hair. So, yeah. SGN says the thing that led me to question was when Michael was asserting it. I know, and that's kind of the shitty part, to be honest, because if that person wanted to be an actual arbiter of truth, they literally could have just been like, hey man, can you FaceTime me? And I absolutely would have FaceTimed him 100%. Or could you call me really quick? 100%. But again, the problem with that interaction is it immediately started from the point of this is fake. So then again, from like a human element, like how much of that am I going to deal with? Because I even attempted to extend an olive branch in that conversation that honestly, they just kind of like were pretty disrespectful to. So again, I have no dog in this fight. So I'm doing what I can, but I'm absolutely not going to be just straight up disrespected by somebody after an attempt to at least cross a bridge or reach out and try and reconcile. But there has to be some sort of mutual attempt at that, which there clearly wasn't. So yeah, I am otherwise unsure. And I can show you guys this again. I'll show you guys this exact thing. So I pulled up this. I made this post, and well, this is the second one. And he says that he never mentioned me to them so that they're not going to take me at my word. That's okay. And I literally said, don't. That's okay, right? I'm not asking them to take me at my word. It's okay. But I did give him a nugget. And the nugget that I gave him was here, because Newton did mention this to me today about him, that he doesn't have his number and that he has spoken with him, but only via X. So then I shared a piece of information that Newton shared with me about their relationship that it would have been impossible for me to know otherwise. And I said it very definitively. I didn't hedge it. I didn't say you mostly only talk on this. I literally used the information that Newton gave me to prove that I had a piece of understanding about their relationship. So something that would prove that I haven't been hacked, because how else would I know this? I wouldn't. But then as soon as I give him that, it's just nice try, right? There's not even an attempt here. There's not even a monicum of an attempt. There's just this doesn't meet my burden of proof. Okay, then that is what it is. Just leave that as that is. Then I attempted again to extend an olive branch. And they responded with, I do not know you. That's fair. I don't know them either. Never heard of them before, and that's okay. I understand that I'm not immediately going to know everybody at all. And I said, funny enough, right here, I said that. I didn't know about this guy either before they posted originally, because of course, you're not going to know everybody. And then I said, that's how it goes sometimes. You're not going to know everybody. And then I attempted to, again, offer an olive branch. I said, while under hilarious circumstances, because all of this is hilarious, it's nice to meet you. And then they go on to say, like, strike two. So then I was just like, okay, bitch, I'm not doing this. Like, did what I could. I am absolutely not going to try and overcome somebody that has absolutely no interest. So that is what it is. In these kind of interactions, I'm sure that Michael's probably a completely fine and decent dude. That's my guess. But my guess is we met at a wrong time for him, in a wrong mindset that he's sitting at. And that happens sometimes. It doesn't make me dislike him. It literally just it means nothing to me. I don't know him, but I can understand and I can think through what's going on here. just take it at face value. It is what it is. But yeah, that's how this whole thing. So anyways, back to the original point that brought this section up. I did find it very strange that somebody that supposedly is bigger in the space, that's supposedly educated with a PhD at Yale, that's impressive. But for somebody with that kind of academic background to conduct an investigation like this is kind of crazy. So again, I realized that because there is no attempt to even overcome this, that it doesn't really warrant any further interaction from my end. So yeah, I genuinely did what I could there. And I looked over a couple things because I really do think that he's probably fine. Pretty much everybody that I've met in the GameStop community has been really, really cool. So I also give a lot of people in the GameStop community a lot of grace that, to be completely honest, I would not give other people in terms of the distrust. And I understand the distrust because a lot of people in the GameStop community have been lied to. They've been cheated. So I give that a decent amount of grace because, again, like if somebody else did this without that kind of context, I would not have extended that grace. I would have literally just said, go fuck yourself. I have no interest in interacting with you, period. But I did my absolute best to look over the first couple things and we didn't reconcile, which is okay. They're where they're at, but I did find it a little inflammatory, more so for the broad community to go about it that way. It's kind of a bummer because now there's people that obviously will believe him and trust him. And they'd be like, oh shit, this guy's like super skeptical of this. So this probably is fake. I'm here. I'm me. This is my account. I'm showing it to you guys. Don't know what else to do there, but it is what it is. Kay says, I feel like finding out Greg was actually Grok made some suspicious about everything. Definitely. I think I think stuff like that. And again, like if we think about the broader community and the context of like where the broader community has been, what you guys have gone through, I will continue to reiterate. I do not consider myself like in the community. I consider myself a guest. And it's because I haven't been around that long. I haven't like quote unquote earned my stripes. And it's because there's people that have been in this thing for fucking years. And the only thing I've done is trade it opportunistically, periodically. So I absolutely consider myself a guest. And I try to be respectful as a guest. And again, it's the same thing. Like if I go to somebody's house, I'm going to do my absolute best to treat them and their house with respect. I think that that's the correct way to act and behave. But one of the things that I've absolutely noted interacting with the community for long enough is that the community's been through a lot of shit. So it's kind of like if I was working with somebody that was drunk, for example. If I'm working with somebody that's drunk, I'm going to give them much more grace if they curse at me, if they're disrespectful to me. I understand they're drunk, inhibitions are low, they're not thinking clearly. I'm not going to hold any of that against them. I'm just going to let it go off, water off a duck's back. But I wouldn't extend that grace in other circumstances. So it's kind of the same thing here. I extend as much grace as I can. But I understand not everybody is going to be completely won over. All right. So anything else, at least on this topic, that we can at least discuss, address, tamp down, anything that we could do? Because again, the point there is to try and help, at least provide context. It's the same thing with GameStop. I don't try to get people to do anything, to see anything. I simply try to expose people to information and then allow people to deduce as they will. That's exactly how it should be. Everybody has a brain. Everybody is smart. So if there's anything else on this specific thing, happy to discuss it. But that really sums up the breadth of my involvement, how this thing went down from where I started. And I'll just reaffirm quickly that Newton seems completely fine. Like we had a really, really good conversation every time I've spoken with him. And again, either via text or on the phone, he's in great spirits. He's really, really happy. And I'm super, super happy for him. Oh shit, that's a tough name. Cal Luca says, I read your tweet and you talked with Richard, right? If that's the case, then I can believe he wasn't hacked. I did. Yeah, I spoke to him. I can tell you exactly the details in terms of like when we spoke and for how long. I spoke to him today at 12:39 Pacific time for 1 hour and 23 minutes. So yeah, definitely spoke with him. He and I, anytime he and I have spoke, we typically go for a while. And you guys can even see it in some of the earlier live streams that we did that were pretty fucking long. And it's just because we both are mutually fascinated by this thing. It's kind of like when you get two people that are slightly autistic that are really, really interested in the same thing. We fucking talk about it a lot. So yeah, definitely spoke with him for sure. Steep Value says, are you excited to see Richard's Babe Ruth model work if it works next week? I'm always interested. And it's because I have a completely different way of trading GameStop. But because I have a different way of trading it, doesn't mean my way is the way or the only way. So he and I actually spent a lot of time earlier working on his model. And it's not one that I use and it's not one that I trade off of. But I still saw a friend that was putting in a lot of effort and I want to help. So we spent a while like talking about how to analyze different things, how to run some statistical tests to test how viable what we're seeing might be so that we can objectively evaluate whether or not this was due to some sort of forecasted factor or if it was due to some other factor that isn't tied to the forecasting model. So I'm absolutely interested. And moreover than any of that, I'm really, really interested because I want to see him make money and I want to see other people make money. That's one of the coolest parts about trading. And it's why I got started on YouTube and doing all the stuff that I do, is because there's genuinely a lot of money to be made trading. I've obviously found my way to wealth through derivatives, through trading. And it's a massive part of my life. It's how I retired my mom. It was my bid for success, my main effort. And one of the coolest things about it is that by seeing other people succeed, it doesn't actually take any food out of my mouth. It makes no difference to me. So it's really, really cool because it's one of the few things that I can watch other people succeed, be stoked and happy for them because I'm still able to do my thing and they're not taking anything away from me, challenging what I'm doing in any way. You could argue that as things get big enough, efficiency will step in and some of those edges will come down, but it's not really going to happen from the retail side, especially on a lot of the broader stuff. So another long answer, but I'm absolutely curious to see how it pans out for sure. I spent a long time trying to validate some of the models, the timing models, the FTDs, the extensions, the rehypothecation. I've spent a while modeling all of that, because it was my intention, again, to run that analysis for him to see if we can find anything that really sticks out as powerful. Now, he's rested on swaps, and he's very, very convinced that swaps are a really big part of this. I can neither prove or disprove that is the case. And for those that don't know, I have a stats background. So the way that I approach this kind of stuff is not really based on what's my intuition. It's what can I prove or disprove. So because of that, I spent a while looking at the swaps. One of the issues with swaps is they're kind of black boxes. You don't really know what's in them, and they can always be managed or adjusted before expiration. So it doesn't mean that as you come up at a swap expiration date, that inherently is going to mean something is going to happen, but it also could happen. So that's why I think he still has a lot of interest in the model, and rightfully so. Super interested to see how it works out. Blonde says, why is RN so hyped? He's really, really hyped because he thinks that we're at a very interesting point with his model. And he has an expectation of near-term price behavior that he's excited to see if it plays out, because also, obviously, he's trying to trade it. So, for sure. Zuber says, can you share about your thoughts on his theories of cycles with FTDs and ETFs? Yes. So I absolutely think that there is some level of predictive value and viability. It's not a completely non-correlated. I've ran like a random forest test on it, which helps me assess the relationships of variables. But the issue is it's not super strong. The reason why it's not super strong is because there are so many other factors simultaneously going on that it's very difficult to isolate them. So what that means is when we would go through his sheet together, which was really impressive, by the way, he spent a lot of time building that and maintaining it. We would go through that and he would show me spots where FTDs were like super, super high. And then he would typically show me some spot afterwards where price reacted in some sort of window. The issue was when we expanded that analysis to the entire set, meaning we're not looking for the instances where it did happen. We're looking at the instances where the condition existed and then what happened. It's not as conclusive. So what that means is that could be a scenario where he is underlying mentally applying a lot of sub-contextual data on top of it that's not being materialized in the data set. That's actually one of the really cool things that happens when you look at stuff. I've been trading for almost 20 years. I've spent literally over 35,000 hours doing this shit. It is at an obsessive level of interest. And there are really cool benefits of that. One of them is you do develop an intuition of things. You see things enough, your brain becomes very good and trained at pattern recognition, and it helps you preempt different kinds of things or see through different kinds of things, which is super useful. So my assumption with his use of that model is that's likely happening because he spent a lot of time researching. And even though something like, for example, FTDs or the ETF rehypothecation or when it's on reg show, even though there are plenty of instances where it happens and something happens or when it happens and nothing happens, he still is finding use from the model. And again, my guess is a lot of that comes from the non-captured component, which actually was verified today. Because when I was asking him, I asked him about the sheet. Because again, I don't keep like that tight of a touch on this stuff. So I asked him, I was just like, oh, dude, are you like still maintaining the sheet? Because I was literally going to ask, do you want to look through it together like we typically do? And he was just like, oh no, it's gone. And I was just like, oh, you like just haven't been updating it. You archived it. He's like, no, it's gone. I was just like, why the fuck would you delete that? And he was just like, one of my last goals was to delete it so that, it kind of like to him, it proved that he was at the point where he just knew it all and could enact it, didn't need the model anymore. And again, from my lens as a way more regimented and rigorous trader, I like in my mind, I'm thinking, why the fuck would you do that? Like, just keep it. Even if you don't need to cite it, just keep it, just have it. It should be there. But again, that just highlights a really big difference in the way that we do things. And that's part of the thing that makes it so fun. If you guys knew my best friend and I have so many similarities, but we also have so many insane differences. It's not funny. What I'm explaining there is that people that respect other people, even if there's really big differences, you still have this deep respect for this other way of doing things. And that's definitely a big part of this scenario. So yeah, I absolutely think that he's found a lot of interesting things that he uses. And I think from my lens, I haven't found anything that's super positively predictive. You guys in general know the way that I go about trading something like GameStop. And it's really, really simple. It's done in like 2 or 3 different ways. So let me go back in time, except I want this to be daily. And I just want to show you something. If we look at kind of every interesting big change in price. So let's call it this window. We saw some pretty significant movement. We saw some significant movement here. We saw some significant movement here. We obviously saw massive movement here. Here. Why did that not click? Here. Just to like pick a few. And if I zoom in and we look at the qualities of these timeframes, you will see a few things. The first thing is, before you get to this mountain melt off peak, you will always see an expansion of volume sometime preceding. This has happened every single time before there's a big, massive move. Like any signal, it's kind of tricky. The reason why it's kind of tricky is because there are periods where you might see this kind of movement that doesn't equal some sort of big move is happening. But the inverse is more important to me, which is before every single time you see a big move, this always does happen to some degree. So if we go back to this window, I got to shrink this window a little bit just because this scale is getting blown off from these other periods that you see over there that are even stronger. But if we get rid of those data points, if we look at this kind of movement in here post earnings, before we had this pretty significant rally. Oh shit, wrong tool, my bad. Sorry guys. I need to go back to my lines. Before we had this massive rally, which was what, 72%? What do we notice? Spike in volume, a huge spike in volume, not a trivial spike in volume, a huge spike in volume. The way that I ended up trading the CATS movement is because I saw not only the volume in the underlying, but I saw the volume in the options come through. Very anomalous. So it's not just the underlying volume, there's also an options market component to it. Same exact thing happened here. Now, when you look at this chart, you see like these two really big days, and you would say like, well, Eric, it didn't happen here because these 2 days happened on the day of the move. However, again, because this is so skewed, we have to get rid of those data points. So if I roll until those are gone, what do you notice? What happens to this volume? All of a sudden it takes shape. You can see that this volume before that massive move absolutely blew off. And again, the day that I'm looking on right now, 2 May's volume does not look that impressive, right? Compared to 3 May and 6 May. It looks like nothing. But again, if I roll those off so that they're not skewing things, you can still see that this is still a really large relative volume movement. The volume on this day was 8.6 million. The 5-day average was 5 million. The 20-day average was 3.9 million. It's still 2 times the average. So even though when we add these other data points, all this stuff gets skewed, the broader point still exists. Before every single big move that you've seen in GameStop, you will see this same exact thing every single time. Now, again, what's the trade-off here? Just because you see it doesn't mean that there's going to be a big move. This is a great example right here. I can see a very clear instance right on this chart where the volume on this day was 40 million. The 20-day average was 10. The 5-day average was 15. That's a massive jump in volume. What was it met by? Fucking nothing. Sideways. That's the nature of trading. There is no perfect signal. But the thing that I, again, can say with certainty is before every single one of these big moves, that happens. So why does that matter to me? It matters to me because now I can take pretty reasonable risk-reward shots. Because if we get this big expansion in volume and it's upside volume, then I can attempt to speculate to the upside. And if it doesn't go up, what do? I place a small stop. What's the point of that? Well, let's just simulate what would have happened here. If I bought here, it would have still caught this move because it wouldn't have gotten stopped out. This was already at the lows. But let's pretend that you did get stopped out. Let's pretend that you got stopped out down here. What that means is you might have gotten in at 2087 and then you got stopped out at 1958. You lose $1.30. But what happens when you catch these moves? If you speculate on the upside here, instead of $1.30, you're catching something for 131% move, 28 points. So what is that an example of? Extreme risk-reward relationships, asymmetric to the upside. So this is exactly how I go about it. I also use the volatility surface. The volatility surface is really, really telling. For those that don't know, I'm primarily a derivatives trader, so I use options. It actually caught me off guard when I started getting involved in the community and trying to learn more about you guys, when I found that like options were like blacklisted. And I thought that was so fascinating because I could clearly see the cat was using options. And I was like, huh, the main guy that the entire community is trying to emulate uses these things, but the community is like told, don't do this, this is bad. I always thought that that was kind of strange. I know that that stood in the face of doing something like DRSing shares and whatnot. So I understand that against that movement, but that other element is curious. Okay. Stina says, did he have any good tinfoil? Dude, you fucking know it. There must have been at least 35 minutes of that phone call of him connecting dots for me. I remember one single point of the conversation from today that I called him out. I was at one point, he was actually talking about the whole Solana thing. And he was saying, he's like, yeah, it's like so crazy that people, again, I'm paraphrasing. It's so crazy that people would think that like I'm trying to get people to go buy Solana. You know, it's like super clear that I wouldn't do that. And then he goes on to talk about all this other shit that, you know, he's following with the cat being a cat, not being a cat, being a dog, then being a sleeping dog, then going back. And he was just like, yeah, he's like, you know, it's like really clear to me. And I was sitting there saying, I was just like, Newton, the fact that you just said that that's really clear to you is fucking crazy. You literally just wove a tapestry of guesses in tinfoil and wrapped it up with, this is clear to me, which is hilarious. So yeah, absolutely no shortage of tin. Actually, an insane amount of tin. Beckett Cat says, I have nothing to go live for. I'm waiting for the new FTD data on the 5th. Is there something that I can do to love you? Oh, I'm guessing that that's for somebody else, but I love you too. But anyways, Mr. Unlimited says RN deleted the sheet. Wow. Yeah, I was surprised too. But he was saying that, like I said, he deleted the sheet because, and I mean, he said that people have copies of it. So I don't think that it's like gone. But I think from his lens, his goal was to like, you know, rid himself of needing the sheet and being able to do it without the sheet. But I, from my understanding, I think he left it up for a while so that people could grab copies of it. It's not like it's just gone into the ether. Oh yeah, Bon Swayze said it right there. RN left the sheet up for a while before he left. Wise people made a copy. Yeah, so yeah, that's exactly right. Which I think is completely fair. Now, let's talk a little bit about GameStop. There was actually a question at the very, very top of this. Bowles says, where's the copy? I'm guessing somebody in the chat will have it. I definitely don't have it, but I'm assuming one of you guys do. So somebody in there can probably help you out. At the top of the chat, before we even started, Coffee, oops, where the fuck did it go? Coffee had a question, but this is super annoying. It's gone now. Damn, that's annoying. I can't scroll up. Coffee had a question about the volatility. I loosely remember the general theory. And Coffee's question was about the volatility. I think the problem here is that members of the GameStop community have gotten so used to volatility that has been so crazy that they actually don't necessarily realize that volatility is still super fucking high. And to help elucidate this point, I'm going to show you. I need my handy dandy workbook. Let me get rid of this other X shit. And we need to find a blank space. This looks good here. And we're going to look at two tickers. We'll look at SPY and then we'll look at GameStop. And then I'm just going to plot the term vol between these, and we'll pick a term together. And so right now, current 30-day vol in GameStop is 70%. Term vol, which is 30-day vol, by the way. Term vol in SPY is 20. And then let's do IWM, because IWM is typically a little more volatile than SPY. IWM is 30%. So this is index level vol. Now let's grab some individual names. Apple. Apple. Their vol is 30%. Let's grab some smaller names. Let's do Rivian. Rivian is 90%. Okay. So if we plot these really fast, you'll see a really clear trend that both GameStop and Rivian have actually really, really heavy vol compared to a lot of other names. So even though you have seen periods where GameStop's volatility is quite literally astronomical, that doesn't mean that its raw vol is low right now. What that means is its relative volatility is low. And when I say relative, that means against itself. So for example, to make this point clearer, let's do IVP next to a couple of these. IVP tells us implied volatility percentile. For those that are unfamiliar with what that is, it plots the current volatility against itself over the past 52 weeks. And it simply asks a question. It says, is the volatility for today higher or lower compared to the last 52 weeks? So it creates like a rolling average. And it just takes account of days. How many days was volatility higher? How many days was volatility lower? One thing to note here is that implied volatility rank is really, really skew prone. I won't go in and bore you with the details on how or why that is. Just understand that implied volatility percentile is a much better metric. Now, what do you notice here as I look at GameStop versus Rivian? Even though Rivian has 20% more vol, it's literally at the 84th percentile. So what this means is current volatility, this 90%, is higher than what volatility is 84% of the time. Yet, GameStop has volatility that's just 20 points lower. And this volatility, it's been lower than this only 25% of the time. So what this tells you is that you're looking at something that's super, super volatile. And you guys intuitively know that with even out doing this kind of trivial analysis. So for Coffee's question, relative volatility is low. However, raw volatility is still really freaking high. And you can still make a lot of money on this really high volatility. And I'll give you a quick example. If we go into the options chain, let's say we go 48 days. One thing to note with the adjustments for the warrants, the options chain has absolutely gotten less liquid. That's unfortunate, but it is what it is. If we take a look at this 21 delta put, a lot of times a good benchmark is seeing if you can get about 1% return on invested capital for about a 30-day option on a short put side. So if you were to cash secure that put, you'd get, 1% or a little over 1%. If we look at that comparatively with what that is right now for this, the premium is $1.20 and the strike is 21. So if I want to see what the return is here, it's 5.7%. That is a massive return comparatively. So for those that don't think that 5.7 is some sort of significant return for a 48-day period, if we have a volatility, I'm grabbing a calculator really quick. If we have a return of 5.71%, that annualizes to 52.5%. That's just on a cash secured put. That's it. So what I'm showing you is that even though you're used to volatility being much higher, it's still high. It's still quite high. And you can still make a ton of money trading volatility in GameStop. It's, again, going back to something we were talking about earlier, it's one of the primary reasons why I was so insistent in my early interactions with Newton to expose him to options and to explain to him that because he's already spending all of this time doing this thing with this stock, from an options trader's lens, I can see some very specific qualities about it that are really, really strong return potentials. So yeah, it's not that low. Zuber says, how do you use volatility to decide using calls versus puts when bullish versus bearish? It's less about using volatility to decide between those. I use volatility to gauge things like where I want to get in and at what size, things of that nature. But volatility isn't going to be the deciding factor. And it's because the profit mechanism that I'm typically trying to capture in GameStop is either risk premiums, which is implied vol relative to realized vol. That's a different idea. Or I'm trying to trade direction. And the more interesting one is direction. So sometimes when you're trading that kind of thing in GameStop, you're going to overpay for volatility and you just accept it. Because if you get a big enough price movement, even though you overpaid for vol, you'll still make money. But there's a lot of things we can do to decrease the total amount that we're paying for vol. So if we take a look at a tool really quick. Again, this video is not sponsored by them. Full disclosure, I am an affiliate for them, but it's literally just because I genuinely like the tool. I think it's good. And if I show you volatility really quick across GameStop, and I put these on a percentile, what I can do is I can find periods where volatility might be relatively cheap compared to the others. And I can try to hunt for exposure in a term where volatility is relatively cheap. So here's an example. If I go to last trading day, the 31st, I can see that 60-day vol is actually really expensive. It's 28.9% vol. That's high. But I can see that 365-day vol is low, 17%. And then I can see 180 days, 90 days, and 30 days. They're all around 21, 22%. Also relatively low. The 1 year percentile on this is the same thing as implied volatility percentile on the stock. All it's doing is it's plotting the relative volatility against itself for the past year for these specific terms. That's all. So in this case, I would use volatility, let's say if I wanted to get long calls because I think GameStop is going to go up. I would use this kind of thing to help me understand where can I get vol that's relatively cheap. So in this case, I know I wouldn't go 60 days. I either would do 30 days, 90 days, 180 days, depending on what my hypothesis was. I wouldn't do 365 because that's a little bit too long in general. There's not a reason to go out there to save 3 or 4 points of vol. But nonetheless, that's exactly what I would look at. So volatility in something like GameStop is really important to keep and pay attention to because unfortunately for a lot of call buyers, they don't understand that if you buy really cheap out of the money options in GameStop, if you don't get your move quickly, you are literally going to get eviscerated. You're not going to like slowly bleed. It's not going to be slightly uncomfortable. You are going to get fucking eviscerated. And it's because of how much vol moves in the near term. Take a look at 7-day vol. That's the purple line. If I go here, 7-day vol from the 9th of September went from 95, 3 days later to fucking 5. If you bought any sort of option and you held during that duration, you guessed it, eviscerated. Even if you got a big accommodating directional move in your favor, you would have lost money. And again, I can show you how that works. So what I'm going to do is go into GameStop and I'm going to find 7-day options. They don't have 7 days. They have 6 days. So I'm just going to use 6 days. And let's take a look at a couple of these calls. Most people like to go for these super cheap out of the monies, like these here, right? The 30s. You can see that there's 6,500. You can also see that there was a ton here at the 24.5. These are super cheap. Let's take a look at the 24.5. 24.5 strike. If I look at the basic details for this, the delta, gamma, beta, vega, and I can show you how these different things would behave. Actually, I have a better calculator I can use for this. This one. So this one, we're just going to assume no dividend, and we're going to use the 24.5 call. Days to expiration in this case is 6. We're just going to look at a 1 lot. The date that we're going to start the exercise will be from today, which will be 1 November. And risk-free rate, I'm just going to leave alone. Current spot price is 22.29. Implied volatility, we're going to use what it was from that example, 95%. Our delta is 0.158. Our gamma is 0.123. And then, as always, if you guys have any questions as I'm doing this, please ask me. That's why I do these on live streams versus just making videos. Let's say that it's 3 days later. Risk-free rate, still the same. No change to that. Let's say price stayed exactly the same. So price is 22.29. Let's say volatility, we're going to start with it being the same. And we're going to leave the interpolated deltas out. We're going to leave those out. Okay. So first things first. What happened here? Due to the passage of time and the passage of time alone, your option went from fair market value of 36 cents or so. That's going to differ, by the way. The reason why there's such a big difference between these is because the dates that I'm using, and this is using Black-Scholes-Merton model. So it's going to differ from what you see in the market. The thing to pay attention to is, more importantly, the relationships between things. So if I plot a change of that volatility that you saw, where we went from 95 to 5, look what happens to your option. You effectively lose everything. So now let's just simulate if you had an accommodating price move. Let's say it went up to 25. What happened? You made a few cents. You made like a little less than 20 cents. That's a massive move. That's 20%. So what if you got something that was a little lighter? Let's say instead of, got to keep that there. Let's say instead of going from 22 to 25, you go to 23. You're still at effectively a full loss. What about 24? You're still at effectively a full loss. So what I'm showing you is that this option essentially is completely worthless based on the change in volatility alone until you get above the strike. That's what happened here. This is what happens to GameStop option buyers all the time. They buy what they think is super cheap upside potential, but really what they're holding is something that is absolutely decaying in their hands. And the overwhelming probability is they're going to walk away with literally nothing. Even if you get a move, even if you got a 10% move, a decent move, you lost your money, period. That's all there is. That's why volatility is so important when you trade something like options. You really have to be really careful with that. HH said, you said Richard was coming on the show. I 100% did not say that. That is entirely fake news. So again, this is the shit that we're talking about. It's like really, really difficult to manage stuff like that where people kind of think or want to see what they want to see. I asked him if he wanted to. I absolutely offered him to do a stream together to just kind of discuss stuff. But I even said, I think I put it on X as well. He didn't want to do a stream, which is okay. He doesn't have to. But there's nowhere that you're going to find that I said that he was coming on. I treat very specifically like my word and what I say very carefully. And it's because I respect other people and I say what I mean and I mean what I say. I think that's a form of respect. Sneehill says, yes, you replied to me saying he didn't want to do a stream. Yeah. So that's perfect, right? Like that's exactly correct. Because that was what it was. I offered him to. He didn't want to, and that's okay. It didn't bother me at all. He doesn't have to. He's absolutely grown. Shinansu says, and that's why the options bad movement started, because people with no experience got wrecked over and over. That part I do get. Hi, how are you? Says, you said on X he will come on to confirm. I 100% didn't. Do me a huge solid. Do me a huge solid. On X, take a screenshot of where I said that and send it to me. You can do it on X so that everybody can see it. It's not something that I'm not asking you to email it so that I can hide it or not show it. Take a screenshot on X and show it to me. If you can't do that, then don't make the assertion, because then it did not. So thank you, Objective. Absolutely great call. Zuber says, Eric, can you explain gamma exposure trading, how you use it in your trading strategy? Definitely. Gamma exposure is one of these things that traders are recently becoming exposed to, and they think it does something that it doesn't, unfortunately. People use this as if it is some sort of like massive predictor of price. For those that don't know, the way that I go about doing research and analyzing the efficacy of stuff, a lot of times what I will do is use a website called SSRN, and I'll show it to you. What I can do is pop onto SSRN and I can look up gamma exposure, and this is giving me like gamma radiation and shit, which is not what we want. Then I can look at GEX. I can essentially search for the correct terms that will lead to research about the specific topic that I want to analyze. So I did GEX options, and I can look at different homework that people have done in a peer-reviewed capacity about the thing, about this specific signal. Now, here's the issue with GEX, DEX, which is delta exposure, CHARM, VANA. The issue with all of this is that it makes a really, really big assumption that does not hold. Here's the assumption that's made. If we look at this price behavior and we see something that has really long net gamma, let's say this right here. Let's say this 24.5 strike has super long net gamma. And we immediately think, based on that super long net gamma, that's going to lead to some sort of very specific hedging behavior by market makers or people that are providing liquidity. The assumption sometimes is that whether you're net long or short gamma, that you're either going to amplify or dampen price. And here's the theory, right? If I'm long gamma and price goes up, that means I have now more gamma. I've increased my total gamma. So then that leads to specific hedging patterns. Here's the problem with this entire thing. The first assumption it makes is that a liquidity provider is on the other side of every single trade. This is a overall okay assumption. It's not a perfect assumption because we know this isn't true, but it's close enough. So as a simplifying assumption, again, that's going to lead to some deviation against what would actually happen here if this were, again, this assumption held true, but it's simplifying. It's okay. There's a bigger assumption that breaks down very quickly. The bigger assumption is that whoever is holding this position, specifically this net gamma at this level, or the group of people that are doing it, it gets even worse if it's a group of people. If I have, let's say, 5 market makers that are the constituents that make up this net gamma position. The problem here is if we look at this one single position, if it's the only item that all of these entities held, then you might see the movement that you would expect to see. Here's the problem. Most of these market makers, they have thousands of positions. Thousands. Why does that matter? Because they're not looking at their gamma exposure in one single stock. They're looking at something called net gamma. And there's a reason why there isn't some software or service that provides net gamma. It's because we do not know, one, who the entities are that are providing this liquidity at this level. We can make some pretty good assumptions, but we don't know exactly who they are. The second issue is we have no idea what all these positions are in their book. So therefore, it's impossible for me to derive some sort of picture of net gamma or even some sort of accurate depiction of how the market is going to behave at certain net gamma levels. There's another issue with this. Let's move number 3 up here. This is dynamic. It's the same thing with max pain. People get really, really wound up about max pain. The problem with max pain and Gex, Dex, Charm, Vanna is that they're dynamic. That means as for whatever reason, a bunch of people choose to start buying the 20 and a halves, that can cause this gamma wall to just evaporate or just pale in comparison to this new gamma wall at 2050. So it moves a lot. That leads to people just typically using a lot of really positive confirmation bias, which is, if I look at this, I think that there's going to be some sort of dampening effect once we get to the 2550. They're going to suppress price here. And then at 2550, if they suppress price there or it's dampened, then we say, oh yeah, Gex told me that was going to happen. It didn't tell you. It's other forces that lead to that. Now, all that summarized, I still will look at and reference gamma because it's an interesting data point. And just because it's not supremely predictive or exceedingly accurate, it doesn't mean it's completely irrelevant. There absolutely can be instances where that happens to be a spot that lines up where whoever's providing liquidity needs to make adjustments. And that's absolutely possible. But that being said, a lot of retail traders, they really think that it's like this significant, powerful force that, you know, does a whole lot of predictive value similar to max pain. And again, I've done the research. I encourage you to do it. You should not take my word for anything. But in my research, it's not super predictive. That doesn't mean it's not predictive at all. It can be. But in general, it's not super predictive. So to summarize all of that, I reference it out of interest, but based on the actual behavior of it, it's not a super strong signal. Objective says, do indices gamma differ in this explanation? They don't. Indice gamma differs in the sense that a lot of time indices are used to hedge baskets. So from that lens, I would call it different. So if we look at SPX, the S&P index, and if we look at Gex in here, a lot of times what you'll see in something like an index is market makers in these entities typically have a basket of stocks. Okay. So let's say that this is 3,000 stocks that they're trading options on. It's really, really difficult and not always cost effective to purely hedge in all of them. So sometimes what they'll do is they'll figure out what their net gamma is, and then they'll beta weight it to something like SPX so that they can figure out what their total net gamma is in the language of SPX. This essentially says, how many shares of SPX would I theoretically need, or what kind of options in SPX would I theoretically need to offset my net gamma from all this other stuff? And they can basket hedge like this. Now, the assumptions are still the same in the sense that we have no idea who the constituents are here, and we have no idea what the basket is that they're hedging. There can be scenarios where you could get to a spot where you might expect a vol dampening effect because of the GEX. However, they might have gained or lost vol in the baskets, and it can have the exact opposite effect because this is secondary to whatever the rest of the book looks like. So the summary of that is the core concepts don't change at all. The fact that we have no idea who these constituents are, we have no idea what these individual constituents hold or what their net exposure looks like. Therefore, we have no idea how they're going to behave at these individual levels. We have no clue, other than the fact that there might be a lot of net exposure there. We might be able to see that for sure. But in terms of how they functionally will behave, we have absolutely no clue. And that's part of the game. That's why it exists. Zuber says, with stocks like GameStop, I assume market makers are on the other side. Does it become more relevant during monthly OPEX? Typically speaking, the issue is OPEX, monthly OPEX, has become way less powerful. Now, there again, if you go on SSRN, Social Science Research Network, here, if you look up option expiration, monthly OPEX versus what it used to look like in terms of impact to price from now, it's the same concept with like triple witching and quad witching. It used to be way more of a big deal. The reason why it's not really as profound as it used to be is because there's so many expirations now. So what used to happen is the third Friday of the month was OPEX. Everybody would have their options positions, and you would be in the front expiration or the next expiration. Either or of those could be fine. When you come up on expiration, what ends up happening is everybody has to close their exposure, and then if they want to re-engage their exposure, they then have to move stuff out. That used to have a very clear defining effect on price. The problem is because we're so spread now across expirations, it's not quite as clear. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist at all. I actually wouldn't limit it to something like monthly OPEX. I would think of it more in terms of OPEX in general, and more specifically where there's big concentration of options. So what we can do is we can look at different expirations and we can see what exposure is. So here in 7 Nov, there's 36,000 contracts total. In 14 Nov, it's 33. In 21 Nov, it's 61. So what I'm highlighting here is you can actually look across and you can see where most of this exposure is. For those that don't know, this is actually very light options activity, massively light options activity for something like GameStop. Way light. It normally has this big call skew because people are playing asymmetric upside potential, but typically speaking, you won't see skew quite as much as this. HH says, how come you and Richard only follow the same one scam NFT account? I don't follow that account. It's kind of crazy, the stuff that you're coming out with. Again, send me a screenshot. Otherwise, just stop saying stuff. Like, I literally don't follow that account. So have zero clue what you're on about. Reese says, how recently was this change in OPEX? Long time ago. Yeah, we've had weekly, daily, regular expirations for quite a while, for sure. HF says, I never leave comments. Let me tell you, it'd behoove you to download this live. Much appreciated, Semper Fi. Semper Fi, brother, coming up on our birthday too, really soon. 250 years. Not so bad. Not so bad. All right. Anything else that you want to touch on before we wrap up for the night? Anything else top of mind? Hopefully, we had at least a little bit of time to take a look at GameStop, talk about some options-related concepts, which you all know I absolutely love. I do this every Saturday. You can go back through my post history. I've done this for, over a year now, easily. So we've been here for a while. All right, gang. Enjoy your weekend. I will see you all around. Be an outlier, be an ape, be whatever you want to be. See you guys later.